All right, let's get right into this. We're going to talk about a shocking crime that absolutely terrified a small college town, the incredible investigation to find a killer who was basically a ghost, and the stunning courtroom confession that left everybody with one single burning question.
So the guy at the center of all this is Bryan Kohberger. For almost 2.5 years, he said he was innocent, and everyone was gearing up for this massive trial. But then, just like that, in a crazy, dramatic reversal, he finally broke his silence, and the case took a turn that absolutely nobody saw coming. You see, in a last-minute plea deal to get the death penalty off the table, Kohberger confessed. He admitted to everything. And that shocking move brought the whole legal battle to a screeching halt, but it left the victims' families, and honestly the entire country, just grappling with this really abrupt and unsettling ending. To really get why this plea deal was such a big deal, we have to go back. We have to rewind to where this all started, that absolutely horrific night back in November of 2022. Think about Moscow, Idaho. It's the kind of town where, people felt so safe they didn't even lock their doors. Murder just wasn't something that happened there. It was a community built on trust, especially for the students. But that feeling of safety, it was about to be completely destroyed. And we have to remember who we lost here. Madison and Kaylee. They were best friends, inseparable since they were kids. Xana was just this ball of positive energy. And her boyfriend Ethan was a triplet, super close with his siblings. They were all so bright and so loved, with their entire lives stretched out in front of them. And when you look at the timeline of their last night, it's just so painfully normal. It was a totally typical Saturday for any college kid. A frat party for Xana and Ethan, a local bar for Maddie and Kaylee, and then that late night stop at a food truck. We even have live stream footage of them, happy and laughing just hours before everything went wrong. And then, in a terrifying window of just 25 minutes, the unthinkable happened. All 4 of them were killed in their own beds. But the initial mystery was made even stranger by one haunting detail. There were 2 other roommates in the house who survived, completely unharmed. And everyone was asking, how on earth is that possible? So you've got this impossible situation for investigators, right? No murder weapon, no signs of a break-in, and no obvious suspect. The case was just baffling. How do you find a killer who seems to have committed the perfect crime and just vanished into thin air? Well, the answer is something straight out of a horror movie. The suspect, once they identified him, wasn't just anybody. It was Bryan Kohberger. And he wasn't just a killer, he was a student of killing. He was literally getting his PhD in criminology, studying the thoughts and motivations of criminals. You would think a guy studying criminals for a living would know exactly how to get away with something like this. And it looks like he planned everything so carefully. He even turned his phone off during the attack. But for all his studying, for all his supposed intelligence, he made one single, catastrophic mistake. This was it. This was the key. A leather knife sheath, just left on the bed next to one of the victims. It's a small thing, something the killer must have completely overlooked in the chaos, but it held the one thing that could blow his whole story apart: his DNA. And from there, the science was just relentless. That tiny speck of DNA on the button snap, they ran it through public genealogy databases, and bam, it pointed them straight toward the Kohberger family. So, to lock it in, police secretly went through the trash at his parents' house and found a direct paternal match. They had their man. But here's the thing. It wasn't just the DNA. That was the smoking gun for sure. But investigators also found this mountain of other evidence. His cell phone data showed he'd been stalking the house a dozen times before. Cameras caught his white Hyundai Elantra circling the area that night. And maybe most chilling of all, one of the surviving roommates told police she actually saw a tall, masked man walk right past her door. And all of that evidence, this massive pile of proof, brings us right back to that moment in the courtroom. Except a jury was never going to hear any of it. So the deal was pretty straightforward. Kohberger admits he's guilty, and in return, the state promises not to seek the death penalty. He gets life in prison, no chance of ever getting out, and he can't appeal. For the legal system, it's a guaranteed win. But for the families, it was so much more complicated. And this is where it gets really tough, because that plea deal completely split the families. On one hand, some of them felt relief. It meant they wouldn't have to go through the horror of a public trial and then years and years of appeals. It was a definite end.
But for others, it felt like a total betrayal. They were ready for a fight, they wanted to see him face the ultimate penalty, and they felt like that chance was just stolen from them. You really heard that anger from Kaylee's dad, Steve Goncalves. He looked right at Kohberger during the sentencing, and he didn't ask questions. He just made this incredibly powerful promise that his daughter and her friends would be remembered while he would be forgotten. I mean, that courtroom was just filled with raw emotion. It was all over the place. You had pure, cathartic rage with Kaylee's sister calling him a pathetic loser, and then you had this unbelievable moment of grace from Xana's aunt, who actually offered him forgiveness just so she could free herself from all the hate. And after all of that pain and anger and grace was laid bare for him to see, what did Bryan Kohberger have to say? Nothing. Not a word. He was given a chance to explain himself, to apologize, to give these families anything, and he just stayed silent.
So legally, this is over. Bryan Kohberger will die in prison. The case is officially closed. Justice, in the way the law defines it, has been served. But the story, it just doesn't feel finished, does it?
Because we're all still stuck with the biggest question of all. Why? Why them? Why that house on that night? That plea deal, it locked in a conviction, but it sacrificed the one thing a trial might have given us: answers. We know the what, we know the who, and we know the how, but the why is locked away with him forever. It leaves this huge, empty void where a reason is supposed to be. And it makes you wonder, what does justice really mean when the truth is never spoken?